Benjamin Rush felt offended. He was like, this dude he must not care, whatever. So he sends a letter to Patrick Henry, basically like criticizing Washington. And he's like, I don't know if he's doing a great job leading because he's not taking care of his troops' health. And he's like, but please don't tell anyone about this letter. Burn it. So Patrick Henry did not burn it. What he did is he forwarded it to Washington.
Raising a well-behaved child in this world requires strict discipline and punishment. Today, we will look...
No, we will not.
As promised, if you have just come from the video from Minisodes, you know that we had the 5-minute timer rudely interrupted Tori's explanation of the Benjamin Rush drama. If you did not just come from that Minisode, here is what Tori said. Who was Benjamin Rush?
Did the timer start?
The timer is going now.
Okay. So Benjamin Rush is a founding father that most people have not heard of, or if they have, they've just heard his name. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I've mentioned Benjamin Rush to you before.
You have mentioned Benjamin Rush. I was paying attention. He was a gossipy little.
He was a gossip, yeah, and
gossipy little goose. We love a gossipy goose.
But he was also an incredible person. So to just give you some quick notes on him, he kind of founded modern psychiatry. Prior to Benjamin Rush, people with mental illness were treated even more horribly than anything you've ever heard.
I was going to say, it didn't get a whole lot better after Benjamin Rush, I don't feel, but like maybe incrementally better.
It didn't get a whole lot better, but prior to Benjamin Rush, people with mental illness were chained to the floor on like piles of straw. Like that was just how they would stay, which
nice
shockingly,
and human behavior. Good.
Often in the basements of hospitals, like they were just kept away, no windows, nothing. It's very, very horrible. And he saw this as incredibly inhumane because it was. Yeah. And so he managed to open up the first like psychiatric wing of a hospital, and he had all of his ideas for how to treat them, which were barbaric and didn't really help. So I do want to include that. It's not like he had these profound ideas on how to help folks with mental illness, but he did see them still as people who deserved help. He was the first person.
You know, if we're burying the bar under the dirt, if you can get it onto the dirt, you're doing better. You just still have a long way to go.
Yes, exactly. And he was the first person to say that mental illness was, in fact, an illness of the body and the mind, and that it wasn't just, hysteria. And in addition to that, he was the first one to see addiction as an illness. And he actually helped to open the first rehab. Now, they didn't call it that at the time, but it was literally for people who were struggling with addiction and alcoholism, which was separate from just the psychiatric wing. And he also was the first proponent of vaccines. He had wrote a letter to George Washington during the Revolutionary War because they weren't exactly vaccines. It was like smallpox, you could get an inoculation, which was the predecessor to vaccines. And he had wrote a letter to George Washington, and he said, hey, if you don't inoculate all of the Southern troops before they head north for the next year's campaign, they're all going to die. Like he was like,
they're all going to get smallpox, and then you're not going to have an army anymore.
Yeah. So he managed to get all of the troops inoculated for smallpox. So those are some really great things he did. And at the same time, the man had so much drama in his life. Oh my goodness.
Again, we love a gossipy little goose.
Yes. And I'll say, like, one of my favorite facts about him, which is so bizarre. So do you know John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, they died on the same day, which was like
correct.
the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, right? Now, what you might not know. Yeah,
like the most American deaths. They're like, bitch, we're gonna race,
right? But the two of them had this huge conflict in their life, right? Like they, Adams and Jefferson, they had stopped talking for years and years. But Benjamin Rush was great friends with the both of them, and he is the reason they ended up like resolving their issues and becoming friends again. And one of the reasons why is because he and John Adams were like besties. They would send each other all these letters, even like just recounting dreams they had. And Benjamin Rush had a dream that he shared in a letter to John Adams that said, I had a dream reading a modern history book, like a history book of this year. And it told me that you and Jefferson will become friends again. And the most interesting thing about this dream is he said that they would die on the same day. They would die at the same time.
For the guy who was sort of on the forefront of modern psychology or modern psychiatry and sort of moving the needle.
Psychology too, yeah.
Moving the needle on what mental health was viewed as and how it was handled. A dude to be like, listen, also semi-prophetic dreams. Let's go.
No, like it is the wildest. He literally was like, no, this history book in my dream that was read to me said that you will die at the same time and that you will become friends again. And
be friends
like,
again.
Isn't that wild?
That was your 5 minutes.
I'm really mad
However,
because I didn't even get to the drama.
When we finish this episode, we're going to stop this recording. We're going to wrap it up. And you get to finish telling me about Benjamin Rush. Okay, as promised, now continue.
I love that I get to continue. And I know that I get to because you are actually interested.
I am actually interested.
You're actually interested. So, as I was saying.
Hold on. I got to get comfy for this. Like if we're going to bring tea.
Yeah, we're gonna spill the tea now because timer's interrupting me right when I got to the drama. So here's the thing. Benjamin Rush was a very opinionated person who did not know when to keep his mouth shut. I don't know that he knew how to keep his mouth shut. The man wrote the man wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters to everyone about everything. And his wife actually had told him to probably keep his opinions about George Washington to himself and to shut up. Okay. Now, Benjamin Rush actually was very progressive in his views on women and their education. And like his gift to his wife when they got married was a library of all the books that he thought that she would enjoy and wanted her to be able to read. He built her a library. Yeah. Yeah. And he had spent some time in France for his education.
Smash.
And they just, they had their, in France, women were seen more as intellectual equals. And he really loved that. And so he was always trying to push for women in the United States, even just starting when they were still the colonies, to have women have the right to education as well. And so his wife was very much one of his like
we love an early
confidant.
feminist.
Yes. And so she would give him advice and stuff. And she was like, hey, bud, like probably I understand you have these opinions on George Washington, but they should not be widespread opinions.
Maybe
we
inside
are
thoughts,
at
buddy.
war.
Maybe inside thoughts.
And so what had happened was Benjamin Rush had sent letters because he was like the first like Surgeon General of the Army, and he was at the crossing of the Delaware and stuff. Like he was there, right? And he had a close relationship with George Washington.
Past tense.
But he had sent him some letters kind of giving him advice on hygiene. Hygiene was really important. We should have all of the men shaving their beards and cutting their hair short. It is going to be helpful for all of these hygienic reasons. This is what people should be doing. They should not be drinking this. They should be doing like he was so big on health, nutrition, and hygiene. And so he had sent all these letters, including like about inoculation, this, that, and the other, to Washington. And Washington was taking a while to reply. It's almost like he was the commander in chief of the Continental Army during wartime against
might have had a few things to do.
Yeah, like maybe against like the biggest military force in the world at the time, you know? So he hadn't responded. And so Benjamin Rush felt offended. He was like, this dude he must not care, whatever. So he sends a letter to Patrick Henry, and who was a close friend of his. And he didn't even sign it because that's how he knew he was doing something wrong here, right? And essentially sends this letter to Patrick Henry.
He tried to post from one of those user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 accounts with no profile picture.
He had no profile picture in this letter, okay? And so he sends this letter basically like criticizing Washington. And he's like, I don't know if he's doing a great job leading because he's not taking care of his troops' health.
Yeah.
And so he sends this letter. And he's like, but please don't tell anyone about this letter. Burn it. Like, that was a thing that they did a lot back then. That sounds really dramatic, but like they would send each other letters and be like, burn this after you read it. And that was like a common practice. So Patrick Henry did not burn it. What he did is he forwarded it to Washington. And he did not, he
Patrick
knew
Henry out here instigating fights.
Yeah. And so he had sent this letter.
At a time where these mofos are still willing to duel each other.
The drama was so real. And
Catty.
so he forwards it, but he doesn't say that it's from Benjamin Rush, even though he knew it was. Now, George Washington might not have realized who it was from. However, again, Benjamin Rush never stopped talking. Okay. He never stopped. And so he had sent another letter to George Washington on his own. And so both letters showed up to Washington at the same time. And Washington was able to look at the handwriting and realize it was from Benjamin Rush. Now, this was...
Listen here a little.
This was shortly before the Conway cabal was found out. And so this was in Hamilton when he says, Charles Lee, Thomas Conway, they take your name and they drag it through the mud. So Thomas Conway was kind of the leader of the Conway cabal, which I'm not going to go into great detail about right now. But essentially
Benjamin
the whole
Rush.
thing,
Same focused.
Yeah. The whole thing was just to replace Washington with Horatio Gates. Right.
Okay.
And so immediately Benjamin Rush is thought to have been a part of this because of the timing of it all.
Because he's been running his mouth.
Yes. And so before Washington died, he literally sent a copy of this letter from Benjamin Rush to the person writing his biography to make sure it was included. Yeah. Okay. Drama.
If y'all are going to talk, you're going to talk about the right things. Do you hear me?
Yes. And so the another piece of drama, which is one of my favorites, and I guess I'll end it on this because I could go on about this for hours. But speaking of Hamilton,
we might need to go on this for hours.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should find a way to do that. Yeah, I don't know. So
maybe
Hamilton.
It has something to do with those announcements we've been wondering about.
Maybe that's it. Hamilton. And Benjamin Rush, they had beef. They had wicked beef. And fun thing about Benjamin Rush and Alexander Hamilton, they were neighbors for some time. Okay, they were they were literally basically next door neighbors. Okay, when they lived in
uptown.
Before that. And so this was in Philadelphia. Now, you've heard of yellow fever, which is a horrible, deadly disease. And back then they didn't have any medicines, and I won't go into all that either. But Benjamin Rush was the lead doctor during the first yellow fever epidemic. And during that time, because it was so deadly and they didn't really have treatments, most of the doctors left. They left the city. And so he was one of the only doctors still taking care of patients. And he wouldn't charge anyone. This man went broke because he thought it was wrong to make a profit during such a horrible time for people. So he was taking care of people during this epidemic for free, and he was publishing his thoughts on how to best
leaders
care for
with
them.
Integrity.
I know, and no one's heard of him. Shocking, right? So anyway, there was one other doctor during the second epidemic. There was this other doctor who was like, "No, Benjamin Rush's treatments are bad." Which, again, at the time, really what they had was bloodletting.
All yours weren't any better. If his are bad, yours are worse.
Right? They're really both of them sucked. With our modern knowledge, neither of them were doing anything helpful. But so there were these two doctors. There's Benjamin Rush and this other guy, and they kind of had they were kind of
mini beef.
Yeah, it was like a mini beef, but it was really just kind of it wasn't as dramatic. It was in the medical world. It was in the science world.
No,
of beef.
I'm figuring out that Benjamin Rush is just a ball of drama. Where he goes, so does drama.
Yeah, 100%. And so Alexander Hamilton and Eliza, they get yellow fever, right? And so they take treatment from this other doctor. And then Alexander Hamilton, who also couldn't keep his mouth shut, he publishes an article in a newspaper where he's basically like, hey, this guy helped me. And had I taken Benjamin Rush's advice, I would have died. To which Benjamin Rush responds by publishing an article that essentially just says, I doubt Hamilton even had yellow fever. And then published an entire book about his treatments and how the history of the yellow fever epidemic.
Okay. I will no longer entertain a single human being complaining about people putting their entire lives and not keeping things private on social media anymore. Because before we had computers, we had to hire other people to typeset, print, press, and distribute this just so we could run our mouths about our friends.
Yeah, here's a pamphlet about it. Yeah. So Hamilton said he's not a good doctor, and Benjamin Rush said he wasn't even sick. Like, that was the level of petty. And I'm only scratching the surface. But to end on a good note about Benjamin Rush, I literally cried at the end of his biography. But when Benjamin Rush was dying, his last words to his son, who went on to be a very big political name that you also haven't heard of, his last words to his son were, "Be indulgent with the poor." Because he believed that even the most poor deserved everything that everyone else had.
Where did we go wrong?
A lot of places.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So that was our the bonus little episode that we had to cut Tori off from Childproof, so it stayed Childproof. But if you liked this, please drop a comment. It's really important that if you liked this and would entertain more of this, not in place of Childproof.
Not in
but
place
if this was something that you enjoyed and would
and
enjoy
not
more
on Childproof, not on Childproof. Yeah, just let
drop
us
a comment.
know. Yeah, we've got an announcement coming up. So thanks for listening, and I hope
Also,
you
it's
learned
important
something.
for the algorithm. I can't explain that. Just
exactly.
Anyway,
exactly.
bye everyone.
Bye, friends.